Hello and welcome. This is Sergio Marrero, and we're here with RBL1 Live. And we have our next guest, which is Max Tuchman. She is CEO and co-founder of Caribu. She's also been a White House fellow. She was the first Latinx CEO to raise over $1 million in crowdfunding. Her LinkedIn says she's world champ, which she's a boss. I love it.
I should have a title belt so I can
I love it. And a friend as well. I've known Max. We go back a long time. Also fellow graduates of the Harvard Business School and the Kennedy School of Government. Thanks for joining us tonight, Max.
No, thank you for having me. I love what you've been doing with RBL1, and I'm excited to be part of it now.
Awesome. So yeah, excited for you to share more about your story. So also a little bit more about Max. She was also beyond a White House fellow. She was executive director at Teach for America after graduating from the Harvard Business School and the Kennedy School of Government. But I'm going to turn it over to you and share a little bit more about Caribu.
Yeah, no, again, I'm so excited to be here and tell you more about not only Caribu, but about my journey and what we've done to get to here and where we're going. But so this is Caribu. I never know which way to go, the Vanna White. We are the leading educational family entertainment platform that helps kids 0 to 13 have a virtual play date with a family or friend when they are not physically together. So as you can imagine, we had a pretty good use case before the pandemic. And then when the pandemic hit, we 10x'd overnight because people really did need a much better video call with children. And the problem is that video calls were built for adults, for us to have, these very adult conversations, just as we do in boring conference rooms. But kids learn through play, and they want to play, and they want to have a play date. They want to do something with you. They want to have an activity. But no video calling technology to date allows you to do it in an immersive way like we do it on Caribu. As you can see.
Love it. Love it. And so this is ideally designed for children and who else on the other side is the typical use case?
Yeah, so we did a product market fit survey, which I can talk a little bit more about in 2019. We always thought, when I originally co-founded Caribu, we thought we were for the traveling parent. I used to be a management consultant, and I saw parents Monday through Thursdays, kind of traveling and not being able to see their kids. And I was like, oh my God, doesn't everyone want to read a bedtime story to their kid when they're traveling? No, they don't. That's what we found out. Everyone wants to, they think about it, they believe in it, they know that it's important. But when it's push come to shove and it's time zones and it's, client meetings and staying late in the office and a cranky kid, that doesn't happen. And so in 2019, we looked at our power users and we said, okay, who's using this and how many of them? And we use the Sean Ellis growth hacking methodology of asking 4 questions of our power users. And we said to the power users, how many of you would be devastated if Caribu went away, right? We're trying to determine, are we a vitamin or are we an antibiotic? And 46% of grandparents said they would be devastated if Caribu went away. And we were like, oh, we only needed 40% to get to product market fit. And so again, here's half of our user base saying, or half of our power users and our grandparents saying that they would be devastated if Caribu went away. That if they couldn't have this type of experience with their grandchild, we hear from a lot of parents and grandparents that it's like a first-class flight. So if you've taken a first-class flight, for anyone on this call that has taken a first-class flight, you may have to fly coach at some point in your life, but you will never forget the first-class experience, right? You miss the warm nuts, you miss the little towel, you miss actually having space. And that's what the difference is between a magical Caribu call and a regular video call on FaceTime or Messenger. And so when we started to realize that the grandparent was the core customer, we dug into the data deeper and we found out that it was Glamma. So Glamma is a glamorous grandma, and in Spanish it's Fabuela, Abuela Fabulosa. And she is this incredible market. And so Ashley Brazier at Lightspeed has been talking about this group of people as a real market, and tech ignores this group of people. She calls them, so Ashley Brazier calls them middlers. I call them glamas because I'm all about, PR and marketing, and glamas just much sexier. But the glamorous grandma, and it's funny because I tell people about glamas and everyone that I talk to is like, oh, I know her. Like, that's my mother-in-law. Oh, that's my mother. So everyone knows a grandma. And I very specifically say grandma because when I say grandma or grandparent, you think of a 90-year-old woman with a cane and a life alert necklace. But when I tell you that grandma is my core customer, you envision Kris Jenner, you envision Goldie Hawn or Tina Knowles, right? And you see a 50 to 70-year-old woman who is a boss, right? She's the VP at her company. She's the principal at her school. She makes 4 times what a millennial mom makes. She has the most disposable income in the country. She's tech savvy. She's a young grandparent. She wants to spoil her grandchildren silly. And like, we have tons of grandma catnip for her to spend on her grandchildren. And so it was like incredible because she is truly, we call it a silver mine. She is a great customer, and tech is not building for her. So we have this amazing opportunity. We're kind of the first movers in this space to really take advantage of Glamma as a core customer. So most of the magical Caribu calls are happening between Glamma and a grandchild.
Love it. Okay, great. And yeah, especially now in the time of COVID, people taking off and using this extensively. Can you share a little bit about how it's affected the business?
Yeah. So our core customer and our core use case continues to this day, but we added more, right? So we 10x'd overnight when COVID really came around. And think about it, for Glamma, she has a 15.8% mortality rate when she walks out the door. So Glamma's not opening up the economy. She's not leaving her house. She's not coming to grandkids. But we also saw a bunch of other things grow. So one thing that happened is when you are 4 or 5 years old and you can't go to school anymore and you can't have little play dates with your little friends, you're not going to get on a Zoom call and you're not going to call your little friends, right? Like, I don't even think 5-year-olds know how to make a phone call. Like, I don't even think they understand what a phone call is. So you find Caribu and you're like, wait a second, I can like draw with my friends. I can do a word search with my friends. I can do a maze. I can do a little cooking activity. I can do origami. So all of a sudden we saw kids using it with kids, not only their friends, but their cousins, right? Like kids down the street in their neighborhood. So that was one use case that grew on top, right, of Glamma. And then we used to say that we were for kids 0 to 7 because that's usually kind of the bedtime story age group. We're now seeing kids 0 to 13 on Caribu. We had to like really bolster our 8 to 12 section. So we have categories in different age groups. And 8 to 12, like we kept getting requests like, hey, I have older kids. I want older content. My 4 to 7-year-old is a little bit more advanced and they're still on Caribu. Also, you're still a little young for TikTok. So you still want to do something with grandma. And we even added a museum category, right? So you're 10, 11 years old and you may not want to read a children's book with grandma, but you might want to go visit a museum together, which is what you would have done in person. And so we added a museum walk category where you can look at art together and discuss it and have like a much higher level conversation. We also expanded our geography. So we used to have users in 160 countries. Now we have users in 200 plus countries across the globe. We've always had content in different languages. We've always had super high quality brands. So that has continued. One of the other things that changed is content partners started coming to us. We used to do a ton of outbound, like, hi, would you like to like have your books on Caribu? And now everyone's like coming. We just added DC Comics, Cartoon Network, a bunch of other huge brands that have come to us to say, hey, we want our content on your platform. And the other use case that kind of expanded again with the pandemic is virtual babysitting. So if you think about the babysitting industry, it is not going to go back to what it was. And especially during these 18 months where we're trying to get herd immunity and a widely available vaccine. I think everyone's super excited about a vaccine. And I'm like, widely available vaccine. Until we have that, how many people are going out on date night? How many people are inviting a stranger into their home that they don't have any kind of relationship with? And so Caribu has become kind of the preferred platform for micro virtual babysitting, because if you are a stranger, so let's say, so we got this story, this is incredible. This mom wrote in and she was like, I work for the government and I had a national counterterrorism call. Like I literally could not be bothered. I could not have my child pulling a BBC UK right, by running in the door behind me. I could also not lock the door because then my child would have banged on the door for 30 minutes. And she was like, I had to get my mom to babysit my child on Caribu. And it was the only way that she could guarantee that her child would be engaged and entertained for 30 minutes. If she were to put her child on FaceTime with grandma, 2 seconds later, that child would have been running around. Imagine a stranger trying to babysit your child, right? You hire someone on care.com and you're like, yeah, can you just video call? Or like you hire like a magician to like try and entertain your child. Like the child gets bored and like walks away. It's not immersive and interactive. And we're probably going to find even more use cases as the time kind of continues.
That's great, especially in building out. Caribu's really building out the digital learning experience for young, the early childhood education. Love that. I think that there needs to be more of transition in other areas of education, but that's a whole different subject, and you're leading the way. So love that. I want to go backwards to your journey. How did you end up, first, in your early career and then ending up as CEO of Caribu?
That's a great.
And let's start from those that know you're like, okay, where do I start? So you used to teach for America. So let's start there. Like, how did you go from teacher to super teacher, connecting people all over the world in 200 countries?
Well, I'll start even earlier, before I was even born, because I think that especially for any of us that are first generation, you can't talk about what you're doing without saying kind of how your family and your history has inspired you. And so I'm a Cuban Jew. And my dad's side went through the Holocaust. So my grandmother was in Auschwitz. My grandfather was in part of the kind of resistance and escaped the Nazis by living in attics and people's basements. And they met in a displaced persons camp in Germany. They were there so long that my oldest uncle was born in a displaced persons camp, right? And then Cuba at the time was the only country taking Jews. And so my dad's side ended up in Cuba. My mom's side had already been there because they went through the Bolshevik Revolution in the Ukraine and in Russia. And so in the 20s, before my grandmother was born, they emigrated, they left to Cuba. And so both families kind of were in Cuba until, hey, Castro shows up and says, I want to take all of your things. And they were like, ugh, we've seen this before. Let's get out of here. And they, again, kind of picked up everything and left everything that they knew and the languages that they had just learned. And they came to the US. When my mom's side came to the US, which was in the 60s, Miami, I don't think anyone's going to believe me when I say this, but Miami was very Southern and no one spoke Spanish. And a lot of the hotels on South Beach used to have signs that said, no dogs, no Jews. So imagine being a Spanish speaking Cuban who's also Jewish, trying to find a job, trying to get an apartment. So they ended up leaving to Puerto Rico. So my family just continued to make sacrifices so that I could grow up in the US and my sister could grow up in the US. And every generation would tell the next generation, the only thing we were able to take from the old country was our education. And no one had formal education, right? It was more about the things we had learned, the things we had taught ourselves, the informal education that we had built, anything we had built from temple and from Jewish education, that and the silverware that we sewed into our the pockets and the liners of our coats. And so growing up with that constant reminder of education is the only equalizer when you constantly are fleeing and coming into a new situation. And education is the only thing that will help you really achieve the American dream. And you will do better than us economically. You will do more than we ever could have imagined. It just always stuck with me, and it was my experience too, right? My parents hadn't gone to college. They couldn't help me with my homework after like 8th grade. And that's being generous. And I just, noticed that I was navigating this system. I was navigating the system so much by myself that I tried to get myself, I tried to drop out of high school and finagled it so that my mom didn't really understand what was happening. And my guidance counselor caught me and was like, no. She's like, I know exactly what you're doing. And I know how you're like totally hustling your mom. And you're gonna stay and you're gonna graduate. And again, just realizing the power of adults in these situations, and mentors and teachers, right? How many teachers really realized the potential that I had and allowed me to do a lot of things and pushed me to take AP courses and helped me understand what the SAT was, or how to write a college essay. And even to navigate like understanding how to get into college, or why to go, in state or out of state. So education has just been something that I've thought about for my entire life, and have thought about the difference between a high quality education and the education that we give most of our citizens. And I just, from the beginning, have always realized I was very privileged, even being, a little public school kid, and like having, parents that didn't go to college, like how much privilege I had in the way that I was able to navigate the system, and the amount of people. I mean, I truly stand on the shoulders of giants. Like the amount of people that opened doors for me, or literally pushed me through doors, or explained things to me, or took the time, or gave me access to things that I would have never had before. I think have been trying to make up for that in a lot of ways, and just give back and like pay it back, and also pay my family back. I feel like, again, like even working in the White House, going to Harvard Business School, like is not enough. I feel like I still have not done enough to thank my family for everything that they've done. And so when I'm like, okay, I haven't thanked my family enough, I'm like, I have to help everybody. I have to help the entire world, and make sure that no child is like truly ever left behind, no matter where they are, no matter their their resources, or their income level, or their background, or the color of their skin. And so when I think of like, how did this all start? It started there. And then I just am the type of person that likes to pick up skill sets so that I can be, as generalist as possible. And I think that my career, if you were to look at it, is like me just saying like, okay, well, let me try this. Let me try this. Let me learn about this. Let me see if I like this. Let me see if the impact here is great. And I will end with this, which is everywhere I went, whether it was nonprofit, city, state level, government, foundation, public school, higher ed, whatever it was, I found it was adults fighting with adults about what's best for adults. And yeah, I had it. And that's how I ended up in ed tech.
Love it. And I appreciate you sharing that, especially the passion, the purpose, the sense of service. Reigns always been true. So diving in deeper as well, where did Caribu first start? Like how did you first come up with the inkling of the idea and meet your first co-founders? And if you can share a little bit of that beginning journey.
Yeah, so I have, how like when you're at dinner with a couple and they tell you this like magical story where they're like, oh my God, like I was on a train going this way and he was on a train going this way. And like, we just like, and it was like, or like we tripped on each other and like I was eating a sandwich and he was eating the other half. And like, it's just like this like stupid story that you're like, I'm never going to recreate that. Well, that's how me and my co-founder met. So I'm just prepping you for the fact that our magical co-founding moment is not going to be recreated. So apologies, because it's pretty awesome. So when I was a White House fellow, I was living in DC, and I kind of already knew that I wanted to get into ed tech. That was literally what my application and my my whole like kind of reason for doing the White House fellowship was. And it was funny because a lot of the people on the commission later said, I think you're the only person that came in saying that you were going to do something. And then I actually left and did it. And so I always knew, again, I wanted to leave the world of adults fighting with adults about what's best for adults. And I wanted to go to ed tech. I wanted to find a way to get better education to kids faster and get it into their hands without any decision maker being nepotistic or bureaucratic, and going through a million different things that had no reason to be there. So here I am, I'm living in DC, I'm at the Treasury Department, I'm having a blast, and I'm like, what next? Like, where do I go from here? Always knew I wanted to be in ed tech. So there was this website called Founder Dating, and it was literally like LinkedIn for founders. So think about it. Where in the wild would someone like me, who is obviously very energetic and extroverted, meet someone like my co-founder who is very quiet and introverted? And like just wants to solve problems and build things. And I'm like, I want to be on stage. I want to meet strangers. I want to go to like the biggest room with the biggest amount of strangers possible. Not after COVID. But where would we in the wild have met? We wouldn't have met at a networking event. We wouldn't have met, like we would, you know, so this website was kind of like a LinkedIn for founders to be able to connect those two types of people, because that is one of the best, I would say, founding teams is when you have the complementary skills. You have the non-technical and the technical. And the way that I put it is he builds it and I sell it. And that's what makes us super strong. So anyway, so he had a profile up on Founder Dating saying, I built this little piece of technology. I'm looking for someone with an MBA and education background who wants to move to Miami, which is kind of where he was at the time because he was living on his parents' couch. And my profile said, I don't have an idea. I'm not technical, but I will sell the beep out of whatever you have if I believe in it. And so we found each other, and I was still at the White House at the time. And I said, you know what, I have to come home to Miami anyway for my mom's birthday, whatever it was. Let's lock ourselves in a room for a weekend, like do our own little internal hackathon and see if we like working with each other. We're not even going to work on Caribu. We're going to work on something else. And we did it. I mean, I used the kind of management consultant test of like, do I want to kill him after 3 days? And he was awesome. Like, I trusted him implicitly. Like he had every kind of skill that I didn't have. And I felt like I had every skill he didn't have. And he also had built this like really cool little thing where you could read a book in a video call. Like Caribu, I'm telling you, was so small. And he was like, you know, he's like, I think this could be big, but like, I need a CEO. I need someone who's a co-founder who will help me grow it into a company. I have a little, but I want to build it into a company. And I was like, I believe in this and I will sell the beep out of it. Right. So, yeah, so we got together at the end of 2016 and then kind of publicly launched the company in 2017.
Love it. I appreciate the realness behind the founder journey and meeting each other. I'm glad Founder Dating worked out for I think I've definitely gone to one of those meetups before, back in the day.
Yeah, I mean, we're like the one success story. It's like really, we're like the eHarmony, like one marriage that happened and is still here.
No, it's fantastic. So if going through the journey now, right, it's, you know, taking off, you are, you know, moving quickly forward. What were some of the challenges that you faced along the way? Did you ever want to throw in the towel, and what helped you make it through?
We don't have enough hours in the day for me to go through everything that didn't work. And like, even when, I mean, this is so hard. like, I mean, you know, Sergio, like you've built a lot of companies and this is so hard. It is not for the faint of heart. And I would say that many times in the day, I think like, this isn't going to work, or I should throw in the towel, or this is going to be a disaster, or I can't believe I thought that this would go anywhere, right? Like, I mean, it is, when people say like the founder journey is like up and down, like a roller coaster, it's like a county fair. It's like a theme park. It's like, it's eating bad food. It's going on rides that you should, like, it's feeling queasy all the time. It's feeling like you're not tall enough to ride a ride. Like it's a fun house with mirrors. You feel distorted. Like your brain is like going a million miles a minute, and sometimes you have no quiet, and it's lonely, but you know, it's you second guess yourself on everything. You're truly building something on a white piece of paper, right? You're creating from nothing. You're solving problems every day that you created yourself. And I think that's so hard. And at every moment you kind of worry, are you the right person to do this? Is the market, you know, like one day I think the market's huge and the next day I'm like, it's not. One day I'm like, oh, I'm going to raise, you know, a shit ton of money super easily. And then the next day I'm like, oh my God, like no one's going to invest in this. And it's also like, not even just like day by day, it's like hour by hour. Like some mornings I wake up and I'm like, yo, today I'm going to crush it. Like it's going to be amazing. And then I have like one bad call and I'm like, this is never going to happen. I can't even believe that I thought I was going to, like, who the hell, like, and then it's like, but the good outweighs the bad, I guess. Like, just in case anyone's like, that doesn't sound like fun. The good outweighs the bad. And I always say, like, you keep building if your customers want it. If you're not getting investment, but your customers are obsessed with your product, keep going. 98% of companies don't get investment. 98% of companies actually run business as you're supposed to, which is you have costs and you have incoming sales and revenue, and the sales and revenue should be more than the costs. That's actually how business works. And so if you have that, like, keep going. If investors are giving you a ton of money, but your customers could care less if you live or die, like, it's time to quit.
Love it. Love the honesty. And especially shifting back to now, how is it, I know you're raising your Series A. How is it going through that journey, that process, right? Of raising a Series A with a growing company that is bringing the youth in the world digital while their parents are stuck at home with them because they need a virtual babysitter. What can you share a little bit into balancing that at this time? What's, bring us to now.
Yeah. So raising money, I've learned the hard way. You should always raise when you don't have to, which is not always the way that it goes. And you should always raise money for growth, not money to like keep testing or money to try things out. So we got into this amazing situation where those two things were true, right? Where we had a ton of runway. We had just finished a $3 million seed round last September. And so we had runway, we didn't have to raise. And also we were having such explosive growth that the money we were asking for, or the money we're asking for right now, is to like keep that growth going, right? And I had to hire 6 people in the last 3 months because of the explosive growth that we've had. The Series A is like, please don't let me fire these people. Like I need to keep these people and keep growing the team. And I had to hire them before I had the money, because just the customer engagement and needs kept growing. One of the really cool little facts about Caribu is everything you see here, and if anyone has experienced Caribu, it was built by 1.5 engineers. We've never had more than 1.5 engineers on the Caribu team, and that's just unacceptable at the growth rate that we're at. So we just have to hire a bunch of engineers. The pandemic also, I think, made the Series A little bit easier on the investor side too, because all of a sudden we had inbound like kind of investor excitement. So I was like, as the pandemic was happening in the beginning, and still to this day, I kept getting people on LinkedIn being like, hey, I know what you do, and this pandemic probably has made you grow. Like, we should talk. And I was like, yeah. So I didn't have to make the case anymore for like why this was going to be a game changer, or I didn't have to make the case like, oh, there's a huge market for this. I actually took out my TAM slide for the Series A because I never get asked about that anymore. Like, people are like, I got like, if you think you have to explain a TAM to me, and also like your TAM is probably even too small for what I'm thinking like this is going to be, like, we just took out the slide. It's in my appendix now. That's not even a question anymore. I think also like we took out the problem slide because people were like I get it. Like, oh, okay, let's go through the numbers, right? Let me tell you what we're going to do. Yep. Today, we got the most amazing email. So last night I did another kind of big blast to a bunch of investors that we hadn't yet talked to. And this one guy, shall remain nameless, who's like at a pretty big fund, wrote me back and he goes, I rarely, like, quote unquote, never respond to a cold email, but my son loves Caribu and I'd love to meet with you. And I was like, all right, there we go.
I love it. I love it. You're infiltrating from the bottom up. That's
but it's so true. Like, I mean, think about it. VCs are parents, or investors are parents, they're grandparents, right? They have this pain point, and they get it. Like, they immediately get it. So
I love it. I remember when I first, I was much more on the founder side and then shifting to the investor side. And I remember calling you and you were raising, and I remember you're like, I need 25, it's like, I'm raising, I could put in 25K, but I need to do it in a week. And I was like, I can't do that. I just got hired. I remember that. That was like one of the investments I missed, investing in Max. But no, it was, I love it. It's, speaking, we go way back, talking about the future of education, things going digital. Now it needs to go digital. There's no excuse. I think it took a pandemic for the K to 12, the education system to say, oh, we need to do this now, in terms of the rate of change there.
And so good.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, it's true. More people can access, right? Like think about the learning that you're delivering through your application. Children couldn't access that before in the same
Right.
way. So
And back to the access point. So this has been one of the harshest realities, I think, when education went digital because of this pandemic. Access is not equal, right? I think finally in the US, like we've always talked about it, like, the kind of digital divide, but now it became a real reality when districts couldn't hold kids accountable for absenteeism because they literally did not have access or a laptop at home. The thing that's really beautiful about Caribu, and this is again why we've expanded so much globally, and also why we've been 10xing during the pandemic, we're on mobile phones and tablets. So, and the penetration of mobile phones, no matter your income level and no matter your poverty level, is like almost 90%. I mean, it's insane. I mean, everyone has a smartphone. And even if you don't have Wi-Fi access for that laptop at home, which again, one thing is to have a laptop, the second thing is to have Wi-Fi to connect to it, you have a data plan, right? Like most people have some type of data plan. And so Caribu is something that has a little bit more accessibility than a lot of the other kind of digital platforms out there.
hands down, the work we did on my previous startup, we worked in a low-income neighborhood. Everyone had a smartphone. Everyone had a smartphone, and then you go outside the U.S. and we don't realize that their first computer is their smartphone, right? Like that's
their first bank is
Yep,
a smartphone.
their first bank,
Yeah.
their first bank, their first computer, their mode of their connectivity. So no, that's so true. I want to ask you a different question because I know that many founders are based in New York or San Francisco, and you are based in Miami. So can you share with us why did you base yourself in Miami, and give us the good and the bad about that, or mostly the good.
To me, San Francisco sucks. I hate it. I've never been a fan. I find the income disparities there so painful. Like I literally cannot. Every time I go to San Francisco, I cry on the streets, like every time. And I just feel like if I lived there, I would be desensitized to that, and that's not how you should do it. Also, San Francisco has way too many hills, and it's always cold. Like everyone's like, oh, it's always like nice. And I'm like, no, it's just cold. If I have to wear a jacket, it's cold. And it's like 100% of the time.
You're also from Miami.
I'm also from Miami, so I just have hatred for everything that's not Miami. But New York, I'm a dual citizen of Miami and New York, and I love New York. And I feel like New York is more my speed, but so is Miami. I mean, Miami is like 24/7 New York, but like with cafecitos, right? I remember the first time I moved to New York, I went to one of those coffee carts outside my building. And I was like, oh, can I get a café con leche? And the guy's like, absolutely. And I was like, oh my God, I'm in heaven. I love New York City. And he gave me coffee with milk. And I was like, what is this? And he was like, for anyone who hasn't had a café con leche, technically that is the direct translation, but it is not the same thing. And I was very disappointed. And I was like, you know what, New York, you are always going to be second in my heart. So I love New York, but here's the thing. I can be a big dolphin in a small pond being in Miami. Also, I am building a company that brings people closer together in video call. Like if I can't do that for my team, if I can't do that with investors and my network and kind of my broader team, then I've failed as a company. I believe in the 80-20. So our team is globally distributed. We don't have a headquarters. Technically, me and my co-founder live, and this is funny, 5 blocks away from each other in Miami by accident. But we don't have a headquarters. We don't consider anyone remote. And that's the same way I feel about my investors is like, there's an 80-20 rule of, yes, I would love to see you in person. I think you can only build real human relationships and trust when you are together. I get that. But I don't need to be 5 minutes from Sand Hill Road to run my business. And also the cost of living and the cost of doing business outside of San Francisco and New York and Austin and Boston is like, I mean, it's just insane what I can do here in Miami versus in one of these bigger places. Also, let's be honest, I'm a woman, I'm a Latina, I'm a white presenting Latina, but I'm a Latina. Like it's just like fighting with bros all the time. When you go to these other tech bubbles, like who has time for that? I got to build my business, and like I don't have time to like be fighting bros everywhere and trying to fight for attention. So I love being in Miami. It's also my place of power. There's a woman named Stephanie from Leche Lounge, and I steal this from her every time. She said that she moved back home because she had a child, and she was like, that's my place of power. That's where my network is. That's where people know me. That's where and that's the same. I have the same experience in Miami. I know everyone who writes the press here. I know everyone who's going to be my startup judge. So maybe it's a little biased. I know all the people that run the co-working spaces, right? But like, I'm being smart about it. I'm being smart about the advantages. Like, again, running a startup is so hard. Don't you want every advantage available to you to make your company successful? Like, why would you put yourself at a disadvantage in a place where you have to fight the bros, where, you know, it costs you too much to even, like, you're living on a cot in like a warehouse for $3,000, like where, you know, you constantly are reminded every day of just, you know, how poorly humans are being treated on the streets. And then you have to wear a jacket. No.
I love it. I love it. Especially the ecosystems outside. I've lived in Chicago, right? And it's not the same as Miami in terms of you have to wear a jacket there, but
Like a lot of jackets.
still it's a cheaper, you know, lower burn rate, just a better, you know, cost of living is the quality of life is higher because the cost of living is lower. You can go a lot further, and especially for founders that are getting off the ground, it just makes sense. What do you think about longer term, like building the business longer term? Do you see yourself building like the still being anchored in Miami for you?
I mean, especially now that like, I mean, I've never had plans to spend money on an office. I was like, okay, so I could either spend $1,000 every month on a tiny little office that no one's going to come to because like we're distributed, or I can spend that $1,000 like in a million different ways that would have a ton more impact. So I've never been an office type of person. And then on top of it, now with the pandemic, I'm like, now I really don't want an office. And I think for me, like so it's me and my dog, right? And we just go wherever we're like Dorothy and Toto, like we just go where the tornado takes us. And I just don't see any major tornado coming at any time soon that would take me out of Miami. I feel like, I mean, there might be a hurricane this summer, but Miami, until Miami is underwater, I'm here.
Love it. Okay, great. No, that's great in terms of the talking about the next generation company, right? Being truly virtual by design. So mimicking your product. So I love that. Shifting a little bit, how can you share more? Right. I mean, right now we're, you know, not to want to share a little bit about the activities happening, right? Like a lot of people protesting, people are upset, and rightfully so.
Yeah.
I'm talking about institutional racism and everything going on in our country with our leadership. You know, as a business leader, right? You know, how are you? You know, give your insight. Like, what do we need to do to better advocate for the Black community and also communities of color?
Yeah, no, I've been thinking about this a lot in a lot of very different ways, personally and professionally. I feel like there's a lot of pain. There's a lot of anger. There's a lot of sadness. So one of the most interesting things that happened last week, so while, you know, kind of all the protests were starting to happen, we were coming together as the first cohort of Latinx and Black founders with Goldman Sachs. So we just got into the you know, kind of first cohort of Black and Latinx founders that Goldman Sachs is backing and saying we believe that these companies are we're gonna take them to an IPO at some point. And it was so powerful to be in a room with these amazing human beings who were building businesses, right? And we're trying to be, and us having a conversation about how do we take care of ourselves? How do we take care of our friends and family, right? At the same time that we're taking care of our business, our employees and our customers. And I think that, again, like this type of pandemic like as affecting us personally and professionally. I think this is another huge pandemic in this country that has no vaccine and has been going on for a lot longer than COVID. And I think that's the part that makes me almost cry every day, because there's so much noise around, well, these people are being super unsafe by going out and protesting. Like, don't they know there's a virus out? And I was like, do you understand the level of pain and torture of the past 400 years of the institutional racism pandemic that would say to you, that is the thing I am fighting for? This COVID thing that just showed up is like, it's another thing I just have to, and they're related, right? Like, that's the other thing. I remember when there was I think it was the Syrian refugee crisis. There was a boy in a boat, and the kind of conversation was, at what point do you have to be so like fed up with your situation that you feel, and how bad does your situation have to be where you feel like putting your child by themselves in a boat to go somewhere else unknown with strangers is the safer option, is the better option? And that's kind of what's been happening in the past couple of weeks. And again, this is nothing new, right? I mean, we've been here a million times. This is why it's so frustrating, I think, for so many of us, because it's like, again, this is so unacceptable. And again, I'm a Latina with white privilege, right? Like, this isn't even affecting me. Like, when I walk down the street, this is anger coming from someone who just can't understand why this keeps happening. And I'm not even a person who has a child that's going out into the street that I fear for. It's not even myself who feels like I can't do any of the things that, my friends can do. So, I think it came to a head for us as a company, and we said, every company is trying to figure out what their statement is, right? They're either donating money, or they're, putting out a black square on Instagram, or they're making a commitment to hire. And we said, what's our unique value in this conversation? What is the thing that we feel like we can do? And we realized that racial prejudice you're not born with that. You learn it, right? And you don't even necessarily learn it because of proactive actions. You sometimes learn it because of silence. You learn it because talking about being anti-racist is a very uncomfortable conversation for most people, and especially adults. So imagine trying to have that conversation with a child. Imagine trying to understand like where some of the biases are coming from in a child, and understanding how to talk about it, and understanding how to have the conversation with a child so that the child doesn't feel shut down and then harbors all of these things because they know they can't have the conversation, or you ignore things because you're like, I don't want to have that difficult conversation. So we started to realize, like, wait a second, we have a huge responsibility in this conversation to make sure that children have content that sparks conversations about how to be anti-racist. And again, we took a very bold stand. It's not even that bold, but we said really boldly, this is not about diversity. This is not about like loving each other. This is not about not being racist. This is about being aggressively and proactively anti-racist. And we were so proud of ourselves, because sometimes you're like, yeah, you care about diversity, but have you really been seeking content that is anti-racist? And we were so like excited to find that our library actually had a lot of books that would start these conversations with children about how to be anti-racist. And we felt a responsibility to those parents. And I am floored by just my network, right? Like on Facebook on Sunday, I was just looking through, and it was everyone. And this doesn't always happen, right? Like with every death of a Black man, like my Black friends obviously get very upset. My Latinx friends get very upset. And I don't hear the white voices as much, right? And I think it's a lot of times because I don't know what to say, or maybe it's not my problem. But every voice was active, and the white voices were saying, I need resources. I need help. I want to have these conversations with my kids. I want to talk to them about why we're protesting. I want to talk to them about why people outside of our house are protesting. And so we realized we could do something about that. And so last week we launched a category in Caribu. So as you can see, we have a ton of different categories, and we very, very specifically called it Courageous Conversations, Anti-Racism. And we have gotten, and of course we were ready for it. We were like, our customer support person was like ready for the people writing in and being like, this is inappropriate. These are kids. And we were like, we're ready for you, because we are going to come right back at you and be like, this is too important and you should be having these conversations. One person. We got one person who was like, I don't know, maybe whatever. Like, I want to have these conversations, but not here. And we were like, okay, that's fine. But like, we're not taking it down, and we're not apologizing for it. And we're going to keep going. And we've seen a ton of people supporting the work and the content. And we made it free. We made it free for the summer because we know public libraries are closed. We know independent bookshops are closed. We know that Amazon, you're not going to get things, and things are out of stock. And we said, we have these resources. We can make them widely available, again, around the world. These are conversations happening around the world. They're not just in Minneapolis. They're not just in the US. And I think that for us, it was like, it's just, we have to do that for families. We have to make sure that kids have access to this really great high quality content for summer reading, but also so that they can have those anti-racist conversations with their family, and also so they can have that anti-racist conversation with a loved one that is not physically present. Grandma might want to have this conversation, but she can't. And it's tough to do on a phone, and it's tough to do on FaceTime without kind of an icebreaker, right, of a children's story. So that's a long-winded way of saying that this is how we felt that we could make the biggest impact right now.
And it's at the center of what I think is one of the most important things is dialogue, right? People don't understand or feel comfortable.
Right.
We had Samara Hernandez. She's a founding partner of Chigona Ventures on.
Yeah, I love her.
Yeah, she and she even said in talking, she said, I'm being courageous enough, right, to say what I need to say. I may say the wrong words, and I may get corrected, and it's okay, right? And that's where we need to get to. So I'm glad that you're doing that and stimulating that, even at the levels of, it's not just with adults, it's also with our children, starting there, so they build the habits that continue into the future to make to really change the system. So,
and even the dialogue with that one customer, right? Even that dialogue is important. So
absolutely. So on that note, I want to thank you, Max, for coming. Max, where do they find you?
Definitely find me on LinkedIn. Happy to connect there, and Twitter. That's probably where I'm.
And how they find Caribu?
Oh, well, that's even more important. Yeah. So Caribu, as you can see, oh man, which side is it? This side. So which way? This way. We're at Caribu pretty much everywhere. Caribu. Definitely go to the website, caribu.com. And that's where you can download Caribu for free. That's where you can find all of our 100 days of summer reading materials. That's where you can download on iOS or Android. We are cross-platform, web coming soon. And that would be, yeah. And please, like, download it, use it, tell your friends about it. We're only free for the summer. We are going to start charging people in the fall, and but we want people to have access to it when kids need it the most right now.
Absolutely. So thank you, Max. So Max Tuchman, CEO and co-founder of Caribu. Thanks for joining us. And for everyone watching, this is Rebel One Live. Please join us every Tuesday through Thursday at 7 p.m. Eastern, and to talk to amazing founders and investors. So